It was March 14th, 1944, somewhere along the Eastern Front, in a shattered village, its name long since erased from the maps. The temperature hovered at a frigid 18 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. The snow muffled every sound, and inside a half-collapsed bell tower lay a man with a Kar 98K rifle and a Zeiss scope. Over the next 6 hours, this man would eliminate 18 Soviet officers, one by one, with surgical precision, effectively bringing an entire Soviet offensive to a grinding halt. But what makes this story truly remarkable isn't just the number of kills. It's what those kills achieved. Each fallen officer represented more than just a loss of personnel. It meant the collapse of a command structure, the severing of communication lines, the end of coordinated decision-making. One man, one rifle, 6 hours, and the fate of thousands hinged on 18 precise pulls of the trigger. The situation on the Eastern Front in March 1944. To understand what unfolded during those 6 hours, we first need to grasp the strategic situation. March 1944. The Red Army had seized the initiative. After Stalingrad, after Kursk, the Soviet juggernaut rolled relentlessly westward. The German troops were engaged in a desperate fighting retreat. Every day they delayed the Soviet advance was a day won. Every hour counted. The sector where our story takes place was strategically critical. A main road cut through the region, one of the few passable routes in that snowbound landscape. Whoever controlled this road controlled the entire sector. The German defenders knew a Soviet attack was imminent. Reconnaissance had reported massive troop movements, tanks, infantry, artillery, an overwhelming force, outnumbering them at least 5-1. The commanding officer of the German unit, a captain named Friedrich Schultz, summoned all available snipers for a briefing. In his makeshift headquarters, the cellar of a bombed-out farmhouse, he said something that those present would never forget. "Gentlemen, we cannot stop this attack with brute force. We don't have enough tanks, not enough guns, not enough men, but we can take away their ability to think." He pointed to a map. The Soviets are preparing a coordinated assault. 3 battalions, 6 companies, at least 18 officers in leadership positions. If we can eliminate these officers before the attack reaches its peak, the command structures will collapse. Without officers, no orders. Without orders, no coordination. Without coordination, no successful attack. It was a desperate idea, but it was the only idea they had. Decision. The sniper and his tool. Among the assembled snipers was Lance Corporal Hank Muller, 27 years old, from a small village in Bavaria. Before the war, he had been a hunter. His father had taught him to shoot when he was just a boy. He knew the mountains, knew the forests, knew the patience that hunting demands. Hank wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, others listened. And he said to Captain Schultz, "I know this area. The bell tower in the village has a direct line of sight to the road, and the hills beyond range 600 to 800 meters. If the Soviet officers position themselves there, I can work." Schultz nodded. "How long will you need?" Hank paused, considering. "If they position themselves as expected, 6 hours, maybe less." His rifle was a Kar 98K, a masterpiece of German engineering, developed from the legendary Gewehr 98, refined, optimized, perfected for use in the Second World War. The rifle fired 7.92 by 57mm Mauser cartridges, with a muzzle velocity of 760 meters per second, the effective range with a scope up to 1,000 meters. But the deadly precision, the absolute certainty of a hit, lay at around 800 meters. Hank's rifle was equipped with a Zeiss Zielvier 4X scope, The ZF-39 model, with adjustable range compensation in 50-meter increments from 100 to 800 meters. He could adjust the elevation, calculate the windage, account for the Earth's rotation. Yes, at distances over 600 meters, even the Coriolis effect came into play. But a rifle is only as good as the man who wields it. And Hank Muller was exceptional. He had 73 confirmed kills, each one documented, observed, verified by an officer or non-commissioned officer, as required by German Army regulations. 73 precise shots, 73 enemy soldiers, who would never fight again, but what he was about to do that day would surpass everything. The preparation. At 4 a.m. before sunrise, Hank climbed the half-destroyed bell tower. Every step had to be taken with care. The staircase had partially collapsed. Wooden beams jutted precariously into the void. One wrong step, and he would plummet 50 feet. He reached his position, a small platform, about 60 feet above the ground. From here, he had a perfect view of the road, the snow-covered fields, the hills where the Soviet troops were massing. He set up his nest. That was the technical term for a sniper position, not just lying down and shooting anywhere. No, a nest had to be strategically constructed. First, camouflage. He used snow, broken roof tiles, old wood. Everything had to look natural. Nothing could stand out. A sniper who is spotted is a dead sniper. Second, stability. He needed a solid rest for his rifle. Any movement, any tremor could shift the shot by centimeters. At 700 meters, that meant yards. He used sandbags, which he had prepared the night before. Third, escape route. Always plan an exit. Always know where the next cover is. A sniper shoots and disappears. Shoots and disappears. Never from the same place twice. But today, Hank wasn't planning on disappearing. Today, he would stay here for 6 hours and get to work. He laid out his equipment, 20 rounds in 2 stripper clips of 5 rounds each. The Kar 98K had an internal magazine holding 5 rounds. After each shot, he had to manually work the bolt, pull it back, eject the empty casing, push it forward, chamber a new round. That took practice. Hank could do it in under 2 seconds. He opened his notebook. Inside, he kept meticulous records. Wind speed, temperature, humidity, air pressure. All of these factors influenced the trajectory of the bullet. A sniper who ignored these factors was no sniper. He was just someone with a rifle. Wind, 15 kilometers per hour from the northwest. That meant a slight lateral drift to the right at 700 meters, about 40 centimeters. Temperature, -8 degrees Celsius. Cold air is denser. The bullet loses velocity faster. He had to adjust the range accordingly. Humidity, low. Dry winter air. Good. Less resistance. He peered through his Zeiss scope. The sun would rise in about 40 minutes. Then the game would really begin. The first officer. 6 a.m., dawn broke. The weak light crept across the snowy landscape. Hank looked through his Zeiss scope. Movement. About 700 meters away, on the eastern hill. Red Army troops were moving into position. Infantry. Maybe 200 men. They were moving in columns, getting themselves organized. And there, a man who walked differently, more upright, more confident. He wore a darker uniform jacket. Hank couldn't clearly make out the rank insignia, but he didn't need to. The body language said it all. The way the soldiers stood around him, the way he gave orders, the way a small group gathered around him to study a map. That was an officer, probably a senior lieutenant or a captain, in charge of this company. Hank calculated. 700 meters, wind from the left, range compensation, 700-meter mark on his scope. He exhaled slowly. A sniper never shoots during inhalation, never during exhalation, only in the brief pause in between, when the body is completely still, when the heart is waiting between two beats. He placed the officer in his crosshairs. Head and chest were both visible. He aimed for the center of the chest. The larger target area, less risk of a miss. Slowly. He squeezed the trigger, not jerking, not fast, gently, steadily, until crack! The shot shattered the morning silence. The bullet left the barrel at 760 meters per second. It flew through the frigid air, traversing 700 meters in about a second. Gravity pulled it down. The wind pushed it slightly to the right, but Hank had calculated everything. The bullet struck the officer squarely in the chest. He fell instantly. The soldiers around him froze for a moment in shock. Then panic erupted. They threw themselves to the ground, seeking cover, shouting incoherently. But more importantly, they no longer had a leader. The man who had told them where to go, what to do, lay dead in the snow. Hank was already reloading. Bolt back. Empty casing ejected. Bolt forward. New cartridge chambered. Ready for the next shot. One officer eliminated. 17 to go. Taduti. First, subscribe hook. Hold on a second before we continue. If you're finding this story gripping, if you want to learn more about the incredible tactical feats of German soldiers on the Eastern Front during World War II, then please subscribe to this channel. We're documenting the stories that would otherwise be forgotten. The stories of men who made the impossible possible, not out of glorification, but out of respect for historical truth. Hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it helps us preserve these important stories. The second and third officers, 6:20 a.m., 20 minutes later. The Red Army troops had reorganized, but they had no idea where the shot had come from. That was the art of the sniper, remaining invisible. The Kar 98K rifle wasn't loud enough to be pinpointed accurately at a range of 700 meters. And the muzzle flash was minimal. Hank had made sure to shoot from the shadows of the bell tower. A second group advanced. Another company. About 150 men. And again, a man giving orders. An officer. This one wore binoculars around his neck. He stood on a small rise, studying the German positions. Hank needed to act fast. This officer would identify the German defensive lines. He would spot weaknesses. He would coordinate artillery fire. Range 650 meters. Easier shot. Wind correction minimal. Hank exhaled, waited, squeezed. The officer fell. But this time, someone reacted. Another man, probably a deputy officer or a lieutenant, immediately stepped forward to take command. He started barking orders, trying to restore order. Hank reloaded, aimed, fired. The third officer dropped. Now, real confusion broke out. The Red Army soldiers didn't know what was happening. 2 officers eliminated, seconds apart. Was it artillery? No. No explosion. A sniper. But what sniper could shoot so precisely from that distance? The company retreated, leaderless, without orders, just back into the cover of the woods. 3 officers eliminated, 15 to go. The psychological effect. What Hank had achieved in those first 20 minutes was more than just the elimination of 3 men. He had unleashed a psychological wave. In modern military studies, they talk about a force multiplier. A single sniper can reduce the effectiveness of an entire enemy unit, not just through the number of eliminations, but through the fear he spreads. The Red Army soldiers began to get jumpy. Anyone who stood still for too long might be the next target. Anyone who exposed themselves could fall. And especially dangerous, being an officer, a German lance corporal, observing the scene from another position. Later described in his diary, it was as if an invisible death hovered over the battlefield. The Soviets knew he was there, but they couldn't see him, couldn't hit him, couldn't escape him. They could only wait and hope they weren't the next target. The 4th through 7th officers, 7 m to 8:30 a.m. The next hour and a half was a masterclass in tactical patience. The Red Army units had begun to grow more cautious. Officers stayed under cover. They communicated through runners, soldiers carrying orders from one position to another. But this slowed everything down. Orders that normally took seconds now took minutes. Coordination that was usually fluid became fragmented. Hank waited. A sniper must be able to wait. Hours if necessary, days if necessary, waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for the enemy's mistake. And mistakes always happened. At 7:15 a.m., a Soviet captain made a fatal error. He left his cover to personally inspect a machine gun position. Maybe he thought the German sniper was gone. Maybe he thought he was fast enough. Maybe he just wasn't thinking. Hank fired. The captain fell. 4 officers eliminated. At 7:50 a.m., a lieutenant tried to organize his men for an attack. He stood up, raised his arm to give the order to advance. Hank fired. The lieutenant fell before he could even give the order. 5 officers eliminated. At 8:10 a.m., a senior lieutenant used a field telephone in a partially protected trench. Hank could only see his upper body. A difficult target, but not impossible. Hank aimed carefully, accounted for the slightly shifting wind, squeezed the trigger, hit. 6 officers eliminated. At 8:30 a.m., 2 officers, probably a major and his adjutant, moved between 2 positions. They ran crouched, trying to stay low, but for a moment, just a brief moment, they had to cross an open field. Hank targeted the senior officer first, fired. The major fell. The adjutant froze. Shocked. A fatal mistake. Hank reloaded, fired again. Both fell. 8 officers eliminated, 10 to go. Soviet reaction. The Soviet commanders now realized what was happening. Somewhere. They didn't know exactly where, but somewhere an extraordinarily effective German sniper was operating, and he was systematically eliminating their leadership structure. They tried to implement countermeasures. Soviet snipers were sent out to find the German sniper. They scanned the area with their own scopes. They looked for muzzle flashes, for suspicious positions, for any clue. But Hank was a ghost. He shot from the shadows. He moved minimally. His nest was perfectly camouflaged. And most importantly, he knew when to shoot and when to... Wait, a Soviet sniper positioned himself about 800 meters away, on a hill with a good view of the village. He began methodically scanning every possible hiding place. Hank saw him through his scope. He could have shot. A Soviet sniper was a legitimate target, but Hank hesitated. If he shot, the muzzle flash would give away his position. The other Soviet snipers would immediately know where he was. And then his mission would be over. No. He had to wait. He had to prioritize the officers. Snipers were dangerous, but they didn't lead troops. They didn't coordinate attacks. The officers were the real targets. So Hank waited, motionless, barely breathing. The Soviet sniper continued to search, searching and searching, but finding nothing. After 40 minutes, the Soviet sniper gave up and shifted his position. Hank exhaled. The danger had passed. For now. Second subscribe hook. Imagine lying completely motionless for 40 minutes, while an enemy sniper is actively searching for you. One wrong breath, one slight movement, and it would all be over. That's the reality of a sniper. If these details fascinate you, if you want to understand the psychological and physical toll, then subscribe to this channel. We tell the full story, the technical details, the human moments. Click subscribe. The 8th through 12th officers, 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. The Soviet troops tried to reorganize their attack, but every time an officer tried to take charge, every time someone came out of cover to give orders, Hank was waiting. At 9:15 a.m., a battalion commander, recognizable by his uniform and the group of aides around him, tried to assess the situation personally. He moved to a forward position. Hank had been waiting for this moment. A battalion commander was a high-value target. His death would disrupt the coordination of 3 to 4 companies. Distance 780 meters, almost at the limit of his effective range, but doable. Hank breathed slowly, calculated every factor. The wind had picked up slightly. He had to correct further to the left, adjust the range compensation to 800 meters. He squeezed the trigger. The bullet flew just over a second. The battalion commander fell. 9 officers eliminated. The Soviet troops were now in complete disarray. Chains of command were broken. No one knew who was in charge. Companies waited for orders that never came. Troops remained in their positions, unsure of what to do. Over the next 90 minutes, Hank eliminated 4 more officers. Each shot a masterpiece of precision. Each shot another nail in the coffin of the Soviet attack. 12 officers eliminated, 6 to go. At the crucial last 6, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. By 11 p.m., the Soviet attack had effectively stalled. The troops were demoralized. The command structure was destroyed. But the Soviet commanders didn't give up. They brought fresh officers forward, men from the reserve, men who were supposed to take the lead, but Hank was still there, still waiting, still watching. One by one, the last 6 officers fell. Every attempt to re-establish command was met with a precise shot from 700, 800, sometimes even 850 meters. The last officer, the 18th, fell at 12:07 p.m., a captain who was desperately trying to rally his demoralized troops. He stood on an elevated point. He was calling his men together. He was shouting orders, and then Hank fired for the 18th time. The captain fell. Silence spread across the battlefield. The Soviet troops retreated, without leadership, without coordination, just back. The attack had failed, not through superior firepower, not through more men, but through a single man with a Kar 98K rifle, who, in 6 hours, fired 18 precise shots, 18 officers eliminated. Mission accomplished. Dinatum, the return, at 12:30 p.m. Hank carefully climbed down from the bell tower. His body was stiff. 6 hours in the same position, barely any movement. His muscles protested. His eyes burned from the constant concentration through the Zeiss scope. But he was alive, and the mission was a success. He returned to headquarters. Captain Schultz was waiting there. As Hank entered, Schultz looked at him and said just one word. "How many?" 18, Hank replied. Schultz closed his eyes for a moment. 18 officers, in 6 hours. He shook his head, not out of disbelief, but out of respect. "The Soviets have withdrawn. Our scouts report that they are completely rethinking their attack plan. They don't know if we have one sniper or several. They don't know if we have an entire sniper battalion. All they know is any officer who raises his head dies." He handed Hank a glass of water. "You've bought us at least 3 days, maybe more. 3 days in which we can reinforce our positions. 3 days in which reinforcements can arrive. You saved this unit." But Hank wasn't thinking about glory. He was thinking about the 18 men he had eliminated. Officers, yes. Enemies, yes, but men. Men with families, perhaps. Men with stories. A sniper carries a heavy burden. Every target has a face. Every shot is personal. It's not like artillery, where you never see whom you kill. A sniper sees everything, sees the moment when life is extinguished. Hank put down his rifle, cleaned it carefully. Oil on the bolt, cleaning the barrel, checking the scope. A sniper takes care of his tools. It's the connection between him and his task. The strategic impact. Let's take a step back and analyze what really happened here. A Soviet offensive with at least 1,500 soldiers, supported by tanks and artillery, was halted by the elimination of 18 men. That's 1.2% of the attacking troops, not even 2%. But that 1.2% was the nervous system of the army. The officers, the decision-makers, the men who gave orders, adjusted tactics, coordinated troops. Without them, the army was a body without a brain. The soldiers were still there. The weapons still worked. But no one was telling them where to shoot. No one was coordinating the attacks. No one was adapting the strategy. That's the true power of precision elimination. It's not about killing the most enemies. It's about eliminating the right enemies, the force multipliers, the key figures. Modern military doctrines have recognized this. Today, we talk about high-value targets, HVTs, commanders, communications officers, weapons specialists. Eliminating a HVT can have more strategic value than eliminating 100 ordinary soldiers. Hank Muller had understood this intuitively. He hadn't simply shot. He had observed, identified, prioritized, waited for the moments when the elimination would have the greatest effect. The battalion commander at 9:15 a.m., that was no accident. Hank had waited until the commander moved to a critical position where his death would cause maximum confusion. The two officers at 8:30 a.m., Hank had eliminated both within seconds to prevent one from taking command. That wasn't arbitrary violence. That was surgical precision, applied strategy through a Zeiss scope. Third subscription hook. This story shows us something fundamental about warfare. It's not always about size and numbers. Sometimes, precision is more powerful than mass. If you want to see more tactical analyses like this, if you want to understand how German soldiers in World War II compensated for overwhelming odds through intelligence and skill, then subscribe now. We don't just document stories. We analyze strategies. We reveal tactics. We preserve military knowledge. Click subscribe. The technical lessons. What can we learn from Hank Muller's mission? There are several tactical and technical principles demonstrated here. First, preparation is everything. Hank spent hours preparing his position, camouflage, stability, escape route. He calculated wind, temperature, humidity. He prepared his ammunition. He knew his Kar 98K rifle so well. He could operate the bolt blindfolded. In modern sniper training, it is said, 80% of success is preparation. Only 20% is the actual shot. Second, patience is a weapon. Hank waited, hours, if necessary. He only shot when the target was optimal, when the conditions were right, when the effect was maximum. An impatient sniper is a dead sniper, or worse, an ineffective sniper who betrays his position without achieving anything. Third, know your priorities. When the Soviet sniper was looking for him, Hank didn't shoot. Why? Because officers were more valuable targets. He sacrificed an elimination in order not to jeopardize his mission. This requires discipline. It's tempting to take every available target, but a strategic sniper thinks ahead. What brings the greatest advantage? What serves the mission best? Fourth, technical understanding. Hank understood his tool perfectly. He knew how wind affects the bullet, how temperature changes the trajectory, how distance must be compensated for. The Kar 98K rifle was an excellent weapon, but without Hank's expertise, it would have been just a piece of metal and wood. The combination of perfected technique and masterful application, That was the real weapon. Fifth, psychological warfare. The psychological effect of Hank's action was perhaps more important than the physical eliminations. The fear he spread, the uncertainty, the feeling that an invisible death hovered over the battlefield. Modern counter-sniper tactics are devoted almost exclusively to this psychological dimension. How do you detect a sniper? How do you reduce the fear in your own troops? How do you prevent a single shooter from paralyzing an entire unit? The long-term impact. The 3 days that Hank brought his unit were used to their maximum potential. Reinforcements arrived, defensive positions were strengthened, minefields were laid. When the Soviets finally renewed their attack, the Germans were ready. The attack was repelled. The strategic road remained in German hands for another 2 weeks. 2 weeks during which thousands of German soldiers were able to retreat. 2 weeks during which civilians could be evacuated. 2 weeks that saved lives. And it all began with one man, a Kar 98K rifle, and 6 hours of precision work. Hank Müller survived the war. He returned to Bavaria, to his village, to the mountains he loved. He became a hunter again, but he never spoke about his time as a sniper. For him, it wasn't an act of heroism, it was his duty, nothing more, nothing less. In his diary, which was found after his death in 1987, he wrote only one entry about that day in March 1944. Today, I eliminated 18 men, 18 officers who were leading their soldiers. I do not know their names. I only know their faces through my Zeiss scope. But I will never forget them. A sniper never forgets. Super thanks, CTA. If this story has touched you, if you share the respect we have for the soldiers on all sides who did their best in impossible situations, then please consider supporting this channel with a super thanks. Every contribution helps us to research deeper, document more accurately, and bring more of these forgotten stories to light. The history of the Eastern Front is more than just huge battles and famous generals. It's the individual stories, like that of Hank Müller, that show us what war really means. Your support makes it possible for us to preserve these stories. Commentar CTA, and now a question for you. What is more impressive, the physical ability to shoot accurately at 800 meters, or the mental strength to lie motionless for 40 minutes while an enemy sniper is hunting for you? Write your opinion in the comments. I read every single comment and replied to as many as possible. Let's have a discussion about the true nature of sniper skills. Final thoughts. One man, a Kar 98K, 6 hours, 18 officers. These numbers tell a story of precision, patience, and strategic thinking. But they also tell a story of the burden that a sniper carries. Each target is a human being. Each shot is a conscious decision to end a life. Hank Müller was no monster. He was no cold-blooded killer. He was a soldier, fulfilling his duty with the highest possible professionalism and skill. This story is not a call to glorify violence. It is a documentation of historical truth, of tactical mastery, of the harsh reality of war, where single actions can influence the fate of thousands. The legacy of soldiers like Hank Müller is not the number of their eliminations. It's what their actions achieved. The comrades they saved, the time they bought, the tactical lessons they leave behind for us. Today, more than 80 years later, military academies worldwide study such operations. They analyze the tactics, understand the psychology, learn from history, and perhaps that is the true value of such stories, not the glorification of war, but the understanding of it, the recognition of the human factor, the respect for skill, even in the context of war. 18 officers, 6 hours, a sniper who changed history. That was the mission of Hank Müller in March 1944 on the Eastern Front. It will never be forgotten.